Hello and welcome back to Undoctrinate Yourself. Today I have an amazing repeat guest for you, Elyse Schunkewitz. She was here on episode 7, and if you listen to that episode, you might remember we got really deep into mental health and strategies to optimize mental health and well-being. And she got into a lot of her health history and her interest in the Chek Institute, which is kind of what we're going to dive in today because since we last spoke, she went to HLC2 training out in California, and we're so excited to hear all the details about how that training was, the really cool and impactful thing that she learned. But first of all, just welcome back, Elyse.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Alexis. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, it's so excited to have you back, and we're both long term, and big fans of Paul. So like, I'm excited to dive into the details of what the things you were learning in person because he shares such a wealth of information online. But I'm always curious about what it's like to actually be in his classroom. So, when was HLC2, and can you give us a rundown of kind of what that looked like at a high level, and then we can go into some details?
Yes, of course. So HLC2 happened, which is holistic lifestyle coaching, level 2, happened in mid-November of 2023. So it was a little over a month ago. It was at the Rainbow House, which is Paul's property. It's a beautiful, it's like 12 or 13 acres of land. And I FaceTimed you for the property and you saw this beautiful view of the mountains overlooking the property. And he has a pond at the bottom of the property. And the energy is just so unreal.
Wow.
I was there, I learned that Angie, Paul's wife, who taught the course, she's really far in the biogeometry training courses, super into it. So the entire property is, I guess, I don't know how to say it. I call it like biogeometrically sound, right? Like, I don't know how else
Yeah.
but when you're there, you just feel so good. Like there is
Wow.
just something magical about his property. And as only we could imagine, right? Because we've been admiring this man for so many years. And that's really kind of what was our initial bonding. I forgot if we mentioned that in in the episode 7, but
Yes, yes, totally.
within like 10 minutes of meeting each other, we learned that we both have this immense love and respect and appreciation for Paul Chek. And that's really kind of the start of our friendship, you and me, which is so
Yeah.
nice.
Which is the best because that literally never happens. I never meet other people who even have heard of Paul Chek,
I
let
know,
alone, like,
right?
huge fans.
So people listening might not even know who Paul is. Um,
Totally.
but how do you describe Paul?
So I initially, when people ask me about him, I would say like he's a holistic health practitioner, just like generally speaking. But then I always describe about how like I found him when I was studying for my general exam at Princeton. I was listening to a bunch of podcasts on like exercise science and like physiology, and I found like Mind Pump Media, and he was a guest on there, and that's what was my initial introduction to him. And I was like, just all the bells and whistles were going off when he was talking. I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about, and I just want to know more and I want to learn from him. And then I went down a whole rabbit hole on like his teachings and all the other podcasts that he had been on. Aubrey Marcus, he did some incredible episodes early on with him, and this was like back in 2017 or late 2016 when I found him. And then since then, obviously, he started his own podcast, Living in 4D, which is amazing. And he just provides so much incredible information for free. And it's such a gift for people because even if you can't afford to learn from him directly, you can completely change your life just absorbing his free content.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, it's so true. And I always say, I wish that his book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, was a
Required
staple
reading?
in required reading in every
Yes.
school because
Yes.
it's the foundation of health. And
Yes.
it's so sad to me that our children and then us as adults do not know this stuff. I mean, it even gets down to the nitty gritty of what your poop should look like, which
Yes.
that's one of the things I love about Paul is that he does not shy away from any topic, right? Like I love my functional neuroscience training that I did, but we never talked about things like sex and poop. And as like ew or like those topics are, right, or taboo to talk about, they're part of life. And I think they're so important to talk about. And the fact that him and Angie Chek, who taught the class, his wife, are just so open about it. It brings a sense of comfort to talking about it, right? Because I think those things are really important for us to talk to our clients and our patients about. Because it's right, if your sex drive is low, that's a sign of health issues. If you're not going to the bathroom regularly or too much, or your poop doesn't look right, that's a sign of health issues. So that's really important information as practitioners. And Paul is actually talking about it. And the basics are even just broken down into his books. And they're not that expensive on Amazon. I think they're like under $20 or something like that. So between all the free content he has and the books that he's writing, and he's working on this book right now that apparently he's been working on for years. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name. You probably know the name, right?
I actually don't remember. Did he
Oh
say?
my gosh, the gym, the spirit gym, spirit.
Oh, I love that.
What a great name, right? Like,
So good.
so I mean, his material and his YouTube videos are amazing too.
Amazing. And the blogs.
The vlogs you can watch for hours and hours. But this man is just so magical. And, I got to the property and I remember sitting in class. We didn't meet him the first day, but he was in the back doing his Tai Chi and I saw him out there and I was just like, oh my gosh, it's Paul. And like, I don't know anyone as obsessed with Paul as you, me, and Keith. Like people love him, but you and I and Keith just take it to another level.
Yep.
And when I finally met him on the second day, he passed me and I said to him, I said, Paul, you need to pinch me right now to know that you're real and this is real, because I couldn't believe I've been admiring this man's work for 8 years. And so many people have been introduced to him through the Mind Pump podcast. I was actually introduced to him because the gym that I trained at and learned to be a trainer at, there was a bunch of Chek practitioners there.
No kidding. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I was like I was like watching some of his videos that I got from my mentor and my colleagues back then. So I was like really like surrounded by people who were embodying his values 8-9 years ago, which is really, really cool. So yeah, so it was just great. There were 9 people in the class. It was a very intimate setting. It was taught out of, they have like a really cute lecture hall out of the garage right next to his gym that he works out at, that Paul works out at. We were allowed to use the gym. And it was really a class about leveling up your understanding of holistic health and wellness. And it took, there's so many medical forums that we can use with clients to really understand what's happening in their body, what organs are being impacted based on their health issues, and then even really diving into like the chakra system of which chakras might be impacted based on this data that we're collecting of what symptoms the patients or clients are experiencing. So what I love is this blend of Western and Eastern spiritual, the spiritual with the practical, if you will, and really integrating it all together, because as we know, the mind and the body are not separate entities. They really drastically impact each other. And then within that course, we talked about pendulums. So we used these pendulums, and we talked about soul connection, and we did Tai Chi, and really started to embody these practices in ourselves, because as Paul says, you're first and last patient of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you're not embodying what you're teaching, it's like a talking head. It's not gonna, and that's gonna come across to your clients or patients as well, that you're just saying words, but you're not actually embodying that energy. It's not gonna translate. And so we have to, deal with our own health and optimize our own health first and foremost if we want to be able to have a full cup to share with others. And that is also like others who are our loved ones in our life, but also if we're working in a clinical type setting, that's also extremely important, because otherwise we run the risk of like projecting our shit onto other people and just not having good boundaries with our energy, and that's going to impact the quality of the care for the person in front of you too. So
Yeah,
important.
absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned the pendulum, so I know there's a couple pendulums that Keith and I had you pick up for us. I'm excited to pick them up, but can you share about how you use those?
Yes. So the pendulum is really cool. Should I grab
Sure.
it for those who are watching us? I
Great.
think I have it right over here. Okay. Yeah, everyone in the class thought I was crazy because I asked for 4 to take home, and they were like, 4? Why do you need 4 pendulums? I was like, oh, my friends want them too. So what's cool about this pendulum, and for those that are listening, I'll describe it, who aren't watching the video, is this pendulum has a string instead, just a thread string instead of a metal like a metal piece, which most pendulums you see have. So then the metal can't, in most cases, from what I understand, the metal can attract certain energy fields, whereas like this thread can't. And then unlike other pendulums that most people use, they usually swing back and forth to say yes, and they swing side to side to say no. This pendulum swings either clockwise to say yes or counterclockwise to say no. And what's cool is you can use this pendulum to check the life force in food, for example, or if it's something that your body specifically would resonate with eating. You can also check people's chakras. So you can have someone lay down and then go over all their chakras and see which direction the pendulum is spinning in. And then when the pendulum is spinning really fast, that's like even a stronger, yes or no, depending on the intensity that the pendulum is swinging. So this is one of the things we learned. I'm still really working on practicing using my pendulum, because something that I struggle with is you have to take your ego out of the results, right? And this goes along with other things we learned in the class, were muscle testing and also soul connection. So really being able to go into your body and just say, like, soul, direct me to how I should cook this food today, right? Direct me, do I want chicken or beef or turkey? And do I want to roast it? Do I want to, cook it on the grill? How do I want to cook it? These things are actually, you ask your body, what do you want? What do you need right now? And Angie even told a story about how she wanted to get like these specific type of toothpicks and she couldn't find them at a grocery store. And she said to her soul, like, tell me where to get the toothpicks. And this one particular grocery store popped up into her head, and she drove to there and they had the toothpicks. So it's really cool in that way of really, when you can tap into your body and use your intuition and ask your soul for guidance, that it will direct you to the things that you need.
That takes so much pressure off, right? Especially for maybe the Libras in the audience, and you're also a Libra, like decision making, like decision anxiety,
Oh man.
exhaustion, but instead, if you have this force that's bigger than you that you can trust, then once you're tapped into that, it's like you can just relax because you know that that's going to be your guiding force. It's not like you're having to intellectually figure out what the best decision to make is. And
Yes.
and you mentioned like Paul on some podcasts talked about when you're initially developing your connection with your soul, to like start out with very small questions like what color socks should I wear?
Exactly.
Outfit should I wear? Because it's like the stakes are very low and you can just learn to pick up on the tiny signals that like you might get in the beginning that are telling you yes or no. And then as you become more skilled in facilitating that connection, then it will be easier to make the bigger decisions and be able to have those lines of communication open. Also, interesting anecdote about the pendulum. One of our friends was visiting like last summer, I want to say 2 summers ago, and we were wearing the biogeometry signatures pendant, the one with all the designs for each organ system on. And she had her pendulum on her, and we were testing the pendulum on us. And she noticed that when we were wearing the biosignatures pendant, the pendulum would just stand dead still on the chakras. It wouldn't move at all. And
Wow.
the moment we took the pendant off, it would be swinging incredibly. Like it was very interesting, and that's kind of not what we expected. We expected that the pendulum might swing faster or like
Yes.
more, but something seems to be going on energetically where it's, I don't know if the signals are kind of canceling each other out or something. I'm not sure what's going on. Actually, it'd be probably a good question for Angie or for Ibrahim Karim from the
Yeah.
Biogeometry Institute. But yeah, I think that was super interesting.
So fascinating. And it really shows you, like, wearing this piece of jewelry with specific signatures on it is changing how your body is responding to
Yeah.
outside forces. And that's what's so cool. And that's what so much of this is missing, as we know, in the Western medical model. And, my favorite podcast of Paul's is, I think it's titled, You'll Never Make the Wrong Decision If You Trust Your Intuition. It's something like that, right? And that podcast really changed my mindset about things, because all my life it was intellectualize, think it through. And we're so out of our bodies to the point that we stop trusting our bodies. And a lot of the work that I do with people, even before my HLC training, but now I'm integrating even more, is this somatic work of getting out of the mind and into your body and feeling the emotions that are in your body, because we're so afraid of these things because they're uncomfortable a lot of the times. But when we don't listen to the uncomfortable emotions and we ignore them, we also don't listen to the emotions that are guiding us to the things that we need. We can't selectively choose which emotions we want to experience. So when we can stop the intellectualizing and the overthinking and get into our body, it will guide us to where we need to go. And this is a difficult practice. It's something I'm like actively working on, and I have been working on. I've been working with a somatic coach now for 2 years weekly to work to start to rewire the nervous system to be able to do this.
I
So
I love this thread, and I actually just had Matt Tolstoy on the podcast yesterday, who I really want to introduce you to, but he's a somatic experiencing practitioner and also a licensed acupuncturist and a doctor of Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And we
Well,
got pretty deep into like somatic experiencing and what that looks like and what people could expect during those types of treatments or interactions, and just how powerful it can be to kind of rewriting our nervous system's expectations and projections onto the future, because a lot of the traumas that we experience in our life kind of get stuck in specific parts of the body. And then we spend so much energy and time creating these holding patterns to avoid feeling those spaces instead of just, safely approaching the honest awareness of what's going on there and just witnessing it, and then having an empathetic witness to actually be there with us through that. And that's, Matt was really emphasizing how important that is to for trauma rehabilitation. Like, somebody can't really go through it alone. They need to have somebody who's an empathetic witness to basically watch them go through that therapy in a supportive and compassionate way, and that will actually allow the nervous system or the fascia or the etheric body or whatever is holding that pattern to kind of release it over time and facilitate healing from that trauma.
100%. And having that person present, and if there's touch involved, even more powerful for people who can handle touch, because it just helps you to regulate and feel safe to start to feel those emotions. So I'm really excited to listen to that when I saw that it just came out, and I'm excited to meet him too. So yeah.
You guys will definitely get along great. Yeah, so I mean, tell us a little bit about how many days HLC was and like kind of how the lessons were broken up, if you want to share about that.
Yes. So it was a 5-day program. And the first day was just really a recap of holistic lifestyle coaching level 1. So just making sure we understood the foundations. And then we dove into the really deep into the 4-doctor model, which I know you're familiar with. And I'm sure some of your listeners, if they're fans of Paul, are familiar with. But just re-emphasizing this. So there's Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Happiness.
Are you singing the song in your head?
I was thinking about how I should sing it on here, the Dr. Happy, and now I can't get it out of my head. After I left the Chek Institute literally for a week, Dr. Happy was burned into my brain. I was like, Dr. Happy is the dreamer. Dr. Happy is the dreamer. Dr. Happy is the dreamer. Don't you know? Dr. Happy sets your rhythm sets your pressure, and your rhythm and your pressure make your flow. Ho,
Oh,
ho.
oh.
So I actually have been singing it to my patients. They probably think I'm wackadoo. Fun tip, actually, I did a one-on-one session with Angie last week. I'm going to be working with her a little bit. Yeah, I'm actually going to do a soul retrieval session with her on Friday.
Oh,
Yeah, really excited. So I don't even know what to expect, but Paul popped into the end of my session with her. And I said to him, I'm really excited. I have this client who's going to be taking off a few weeks, and we're going to be really diving deep into his health, because unfortunately he's like on the verge of basically on the verge of being very sick. So, and I'm going to implement all the Chek ideas and protocols. I'm really excited about it. And Paul said, have your client sing all 4 doctor songs 4 times a day, because I created the song so they have a very specific frequency and feeling that really gets absorbed into the body. And I was like, okay, I kind of like that. That's cool.
I mean, you can't help but be happy and uplifted while you're singing those, right?
Right. And then you actually remember the content of it, right? Like, you remember about nourishing your body and why movement is important and why quiet is important. And the biggest thing, and the reason I love the 4 doctors model, is because it just simplifies things, right? It's the yin and the yang. In the yin, you have, what is it, Dr. Diet and Dr. Quiet. And then the yang, you have Dr. Happy and Dr. Movement. And it's really about creating this balance in your life of both working out and doing, and then working in and calming and nourishing. And we don't have enough of that yin. We don't have enough of that calming and nourishing in our lives, especially if you live in a city or close to a city, or you're working a lot in a place like the United States. But it's about finding that balance. So the 4 doctor songs help you figure out how to find that balance. But the biggest thing that Paul drives home is, and this is not just an HLC too, but all of his messages is, with a dream, there is no crisis.
Mhm.
What is your dream? What is your one love? What are you here to do? What is the reason that you're excited to go to sleep so you can wake up and feel refreshed and go do that thing that brings you so much energy? And, people come to us, as practitioners, and they want to change things and they want to improve their health or their mental health or their physical body, but without an actual like big dream and love. What's the motivation to do it? Right? What are the driving forces? So something that's really important, I think, for everyone here who's listening to think about, and anyone who's whether you're a practitioner, you're just, you work a different type of job, thinking about what is your dream and asking your clients, what is your dream? And if they don't know their dream, really try to take some time to figure it out. A lot of people don't know their dream. So Paul says, figure out then what is your nightmare? And let's find the opposite of it.
Mhm.
So, and you can really ask yourself, what are your values? What brings you joy? How do you like spending your time? Where do you spend money? Right? That's a really important indicator of what your dream is. For something like for you and me, we spend a lot of money on good quality food. That's really important to us. That's probably part of our longer term dream also, is being able to have a regenerative farm or being able to access really good quality food in life. And your dream doesn't have to be just one thing. It can be a lot of things. It can be like the whole big picture of what you want in life. So that's really, really important. That was probably one of the biggest takeaways for me, is the importance of sitting down with every client I work with and really diving into, what is your dream? What is it that you're here to achieve?
That's so important because, like you said, without that structure, that guiding force, anything could be the right answer, but it's like you don't even know because you
Yeah.
don't have that path. You're not on any single path. And I mean, it can be really scary for people to identify their dream because they could have been living a very like mediocre life to them, and that could require them to get out of the job, the relationship, the friendships, and it could create a whole massive upheaval of their life at this point in time, so that can be very scary. So, I mean, identifying and being honest about what, you value, what you love, and what you feel like you're here to do is gonna be, like, the major first step, and I think also that's where it comes into, like, optimizing your you can start to make benefits on, like, your hydration, your diet, your movement, because if you can gain energy in other ways, it can help you build, like, the fortitude to actually do the bigger things and make those big decisions and feel okay about it. Because, I mean, if you're just if you're very sick and your body's unhealthy, it could be scary to get out of the relationship because maybe that's your support system and you can't take care of yourself by yourself at that point, so it
Yeah,
requires, like, slow steps.
absolutely. And I'm going to be totally transparent. I woke up, the class ended on a Sunday night, stayed at the Airbnb, woke up Monday morning to fly home, and I had the biggest pit in my stomach. And I
Mm.
went out into the kitchen. I stayed in an Airbnb with 5 other people from the class. And I went out to the kitchen and 2 of the guys were there making breakfast. And I said, guys, I don't know what my dream is anymore. Like, I really I was dreading going back to New York. A part of me was, and I was on this beautiful property, hanging out with these like-minded people who I was learning so much from. I mean, the participants in the class were just, they were such cool people. And really what I love about going to in-person classes like this is a lot of times you learn just as much, if not more, from your peers as you do from the instructor in the class. So, and I was just surrounded by really, really awesome, open-minded, kind, loving, interesting folks. And they look at me, 2 of the guys look at me and they go, well, that's a good place to be, Elyse. When I said to them, I don't know what my dream is. And I was like, what? That's not the answer I wanted. Like, what are you talking about? And one of them said, well, if you didn't sometimes have this kind of conflict or confusion, like, what would you be? And I said, dead. And he said, yeah, this is part of life, and it's so true, is that our dreams do need to be redefined from time, as time goes on, right? I had this amazing dream of building my holistic practice and, learning anatomy and movement from becoming a personal trainer, and learning psychotherapy and psychiatry from working at Bellevue and working at NYU, and studying functional neuroscience and studying holistic health and functional medicine practices. And then I finally built this dream of my integrative holistic practice. and I achieved it. So now I do need it's time to redefine the dream, right? Like it's time to figure out what's next in my life. And as I was working through this class, realizing, maybe the things that I thought were my dream, maybe they need a little bit of adjusting or changing. And there's parts that are scary, like you said, right? Like, does it involve changing your geography? Does it involve changing your partnerships? Does it involve changing your career? Those things are really, really hard to look at sometimes when they're a sense of stability and predictability, because our brain loves pattern recognition, it loves prediction. And what does it mean if we just one day, decide that we're going to leave our partner, or decide that we're going to change our career, or decide that we're going to move out of the place that we're living? That's really scary. So these are things that you have to do slowly, and give yourself time to really figure out, like, what is it that I want, and what is it that I want to feel. That's the biggest thing.
Mhm, mhm, and you're bringing up some, thoughts for me about psychedelics because, I mean, when you think about the disruption of the default mode network and how inconvenient that could be to a functioning society, you can kind of understand why they were, like, immediately outlawed when they first came onto the scene, like, in the '60s, and, like, they were just kind of out of left field because they were having these so unexpected effects on just the way people wanted to live their lives, and now they're kind of having a renaissance. And I mean, for better or worse, I think they're tools. Obviously they're not a perfect solution in most or many contexts. You kind of have to have skills like Paul talks about tai chi, qigong, and meditation, and ways to navigate that inner landscape outside of the drug experience. And then if you were to have these intense medicine ceremonies, you could actually have the tools built in already to navigate those more challenging experiences, which will undoubtedly come up. Um, but yeah, I think what you're saying is so true about, needing to redefine your dreams, and like also the role of medicine ceremonies in that, because in a lot of the traditional cultures, there would be rites of passage where, you reach a certain age and then you have some sort of psychedelic experience that initiates you into a new period of your life that's kind of redefining who you are in that moment and giving you a new path forward. And we're just totally missing rites of passage in general in our modern society. And I think it really shows.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't really see so much change between different age groups,
Yeah.
right? Childhood into adolescence, into young adulthood, into adulthood. That's true. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like we work kids the same way we work adults now. It's just like you're sitting all day, you're doing this work, you're memorizing this stuff, and they're just training you to be this like perfect little productive adult that's kind of an automaton that's not challenging the status quo, that's not thinking outside of the box. And it's sad because it's
Exactly.
robbing childhood from children.
And they still don't know what their poop should look like, or why they shouldn't use the
Wait,
microwave.
none of the important stuff is learned.
Right. No, 100%. 100%. I mean, could you imagine if you taught children how to trust their intuition from a young age? We're literally, as adults, having to unlearn all of these things,
Yes.
like how we should be acting and behaving and producing. Whereas, kids should be able to be free and run around and learn in different ways. Um, and I wonder if now if it's all starting to kind of like backlash at us, with these, and, a lot of people have a lot of children are, we're seeing like a huge influx of mental health issues in childhood, and, kids who do need different ways of learning and probably should be out in nature. I mean, rates of ADHD have just skyrocketed, right? It's like, why? Kids are not out in nature. They're not eating foods that are beneficial for their health and that are nourishing for their body. And they're also, they're just stuck. They're stuck looking at screens all day.
Yes, and those quick dopamine hits that you get from that screen time and the social media and whatever YouTube, and you actually see the trend in like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. They're all going with like these very short form hits of like a minute, 2 minute videos that's like giving you this quick hit, and then you're moving on to the next one and then the next one. And it's like this endless loop of like you're just searching for the next hit, and that's not conducive to actually living a meaningful and fulfilling life, because that requires a slow build up to accomplish a goal. It's not like instant gratification.
Right. Right. I see that a lot. I see that a lot in like my younger cousins where, and not to totally like hate on it, but hate on them, but this lack of experience of working hard and having to do stuff you don't necessarily want to do. Like, I don't know about you, but I worked at my gym. This was after college. I worked at my gym to get a free membership, and I was like literally washing towels and cleaning equipment, and I worked at Bloomingdale's, you know, putting stuff back on the rack and folding stuff up, and trying to jam like huge sheets that people, you know, bed sheets that people were trying to take out to look at and jam them back into a package in the proper way, right? And you like learn this skill of really doing shit you don't want to do, but building that resilience and that tolerance. Whereas, you know, the instant gratification, they don't have that muscle anymore of working hard to achieve something. And it's kind of crazy because now you have, you know, young people who are TikTok influencers making way more money than you and I could ever dream of.
Literally.
You know, I mean, it really goes back to that whole thing. What is it? Uh, hard times make,
Ah, yes.
what is it? Hard times make
Art.
strong men.
Yes.
Strong men make easy times. Easy times make weak men. Weak men make hard times.
The cycle.
Yeah.
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 And oh gosh, yeah, there's so much here. And I mean, we talked about this before too, where it's like on the plus side, they're not having to engage in this like work that's not something they're passionate about, and they're leaning into what they are passionate about. But at the same time, there is value in doing the hard things. And I mean, you can also see an uptick in like cold exposure and sauna and people trying to biohack in these ways, which is a voluntary form of doing something difficult, which is
Yeah.
great.
The comfort. Yes.
Yeah, you can obviously get that through exercise as well, which is also great. And the great thing about those modalities is it does translate to other parts of your life where
Absolutely.
you become more resilient to challenge in general.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Did you guys talk about cold at all during HLC2, or did you get into any modalities?
Did we talk about cold? We talked about fasting and how to identify like whether it's right for you or not, and kind of like is, yeah, like, well, Angie was like, you know, one of the things she said that I was looking through my notes is that women are really not made to fast so much, and men should not be doing it for extensive periods of time. We talked about also like detoxing people. Like, at what point do you start to detox people? So, you know, there's all different types of detox, right? Like, even just changing someone's diet is a form of detox if you're cleaning up their diet, because they're going to start getting the toxins out of their body. So we talked about how, when you're going to do these things and integrate exercise practices or even things like cold exposure, that you have to really evaluate how healthy is this person in front of you. And that's where kind of the end of the course, the last 2 days, was looking into the paperwork of, I mean, there's literally hours and hours of paperwork you could give clients to really identify what's happening in their health. And like I said, also, you know, what organs are being affected, what chakras might be affected. But someone who may be eating a lot of fast food, is not really getting a lot of movement, is not breathing well, they are going to feel really crappy when you start to put them on an exercise regimen and a different diet, and making sure that they're doing some breath work. In fact, Paul said, like, do not have them exercise right away. Have them just go on like slow walks and increase their movement a little bit more, because they already are so stressed out. And also in our culture, when we talk about stress, we don't talk about, like, when people hear the word stress, I think they just think about emotional stress, right? They're like, oh, I'm so stressed out at work. My boss is like being a pain in my butt. They don't think about physical stress on the body. And the reality is that if you're eating a lot of conventionally farmed produce and meats, or you're eating a lot of fast food, a lot of processed food, that's a lot of stress on the body. If you're not breathing well, that's stress on the body. If you're not sleeping well, that's stress on the body. So, and then on top of that, you probably have a lot of emotional stress too, if you're in that situation. So we have to think about, when you start to detox people and change their habits and have them engage in new protocols, really easing them into it, so they don't detox too quickly. Because if they detox too quickly, A, they're going to feel really crappy, and B, they're probably going to bail on the treatment plan, because they're like, this isn't working, I feel worse. So doing things like, even though we didn't talk about it specifically, doing things like cold exposure also like need to be eased, as you know too, is need to be eased in, because it can be such a shock to the body, it can be a stress on the body. if you're too high stress.
Absolutely. I actually love this thread because it's bringing up some things we talked about in the podcast I did with Matt, but also the one I did with Rua, where if the body doesn't feel a sense of safety, then it's not going to take on that new pattern of being as a safe, efficient option. The nervous system needs to feel a certain amount of stress to get the adaptation, but it can't be over that amount because otherwise it becomes a threat that shuts down learning and memory. It pushes you away from parasympathetic activation, and that will just basically make you more rigid into your behavioral patterns that we're trying to get you out of. So absolutely so important to ease in and get the just the right dose of stress needed to make the positive adaptations, but not more or less than that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yes. And I talk even just like, in our first episodes together, we talked about getting outside of your comfort zone and building self-esteem. Is that if you try to do something that is so far out of your comfort zone, like too far out of your comfort zone, it's going to cause, and think about it in the weight room too, right? If you try to lift a weight that is way too heavy for you, it's going to cause injury, it's going to cause pain, it's going to cause trauma, whether that be physical or emotional, right? And you have to find that sweet spot of how can you push yourself just a little bit outside your comfort zone in order to change the habits and get a different response, do have a little bit of a different stimulus to instill a different response in the body without going too far. And that's also what I love about Chek's program, is that it is so much about the individualization of treatment and of planning with people, because our bodies are so different and our needs are so different. And he does a lot of the what is it, the metabolic typing and the primal patterns for the food, and really looking to see what does your body need based on genetics, based on lifestyle, based on current geography, based on where your ancestors used to live, like really understanding that your body needs different things compared to what other people need, compared to what your partner or your friends need, but also even just seasonally, our bodies need something different. I mean, we see this all the time, right? If you eat local produce, the produce that you have available to you is going to be very different in the summer than it is going to be in the winter. And there's really, I think, the biggest thing is like when you're in this industries, in these health industries that you and I are in, people want a very easy, simple solution. Like they want to hear like an absolute. And then you see people who are on social media who are very absolute about things, and they blow up because you either love them or hate them, right? They're either like amazing or they're super controversial. Well, they're always controversial, but they're, people either love them or hate them. And people think it's an easy fix for their problems. The people who are more nuanced, like you and me, it's sometimes slower to grow an audience because people don't want to necessarily hear that it's not so black and white, right? I love Paul Saladino, I love Carnivore MD, but like the reality is he's very absolute and very rigid in his thinking, and we know that his diet plan is not going to work for everybody. So that's the thing about Chek's protocols, is that it is not teaching you what to think, it's teaching you how to think, and it's teaching you how to help the individual that is in front of you with a unique stress history, with a unique diet, with unique genetics, with unique life experience, and really create a plan that's going to help them grow and evolve and achieve their dream.
Amen to that. I mean, that's what we all need and strive for. And obviously, it's not the easy solution, but nothing worthwhile, barely anything worthwhile is easy. And
Yeah.
so interesting about like the human psyche, how we just tend to gravitate towards this polarized way of thinking, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess maybe it's part of that predictability that the brain wants.
That's true. It definitely creates stability of like worldview and less uncertainty, which makes it less scary, even if
Absolutely.
it's not working.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it doesn't work for everybody. That's the thing, is that, and also it's very young. It's very masculine energy to just choose one thing. It's not, it doesn't create that balance. So you need, like I said, earlier, you need a balance of both. You need that masculine and feminine. You need that yin and that yang energy. And that's something I really took away from the course. I've been doing Tai Chi every day. I'm committing to a gong. I'm
Yes,
on
tell us about
day,
that.
yeah, I'm on day 39 right now. So
Wow.
a gong is 100 days of practice. And we did Tai Chi every day in the class, which was so nice as a group for 20 minutes. And then I thought to myself, why don't I just keep this up? Like, this is great. So, something that I lack, I'm going through a really big transformative experience and error in my life right now, a season in my life, because I have been in such intense yang energy for so long and so much yin deficiency that I am so out of balance, and it has messed up my hormones and my sleep and all those things, weight loss ability. And I'm really doing a lot, like integrating a lot of yin into my life at this time, which is not easy to do, especially in a place like New York City. And the most challenging thing about it is, and I heard this from Dr. Ellen Vora, is to not yang your yin.
Oh,
Isn't that good? Isn't that so good? Yeah, like to not basically make your yin practices being working in practices, nourishing practices, Tai Chi, meditation, slow yoga, slow walking, any sort of activity that if you're moving, your heart rate stays the same and your mouth stays moist, right? If you're working out really intensely, your mouth tends to get dry and your heart rate tends to go up. So when we talk about yin activities, we're talking about things that are giving to the nervous system, nourishing the nervous system. But what happens is, and I'm so guilty of this for so many years, is that we tell ourselves we have to do the meditation, we have to do the Tai Chi, we have to do the yoga. And then it's become another thing on our to-do list, and then stressing us out that it's on the to-do list and we haven't done it. And then I'm sitting there, trying to do my breath work. And instead I'm going, well, when is this going to be over? Because I got 500 other things I got to do. Right. So that's really, that kind of takes away the effects of doing the working and exercise. So something that I've been more mindful of is really creating that space to do the exercise and practices with, and trying not to put it, bookend it with things that I'm stressed out about, and really give myself the time to be present with it. And the thing I love about these Tai Chi working and practices is, and I actually have a really nice one on my Instagram. It's called the energy push. So it's, a little like breathing out as you push your arms forward and extend your arms completely, and then breathing in, inhaling as you bring your arms forward, and just repeating that. And you could do it seated, you could do it standing. But the thing that's nice about these is that a lot of people really struggle to just meditate if they've never meditated before, right? They sit down to meditate and they think to themselves, oh my gosh, this is the biggest waste of time. I'd rather be doing anything else in the world. I'd rather be sitting in a dentist chair. I have 500 other things on my to-do list that I need to get done, right? And we can't sit still and we can't go into our bodies. Instead, we're in our mind. So what's really nice about these meditative movement practices is that it's such a great way to get out of your mind and just breathe with your body moving and focusing on the exhale as you move one way and the inhale as you move in another way. And a lot of my clients who struggle with meditation, they love this. They love it because they're able to get out of their mind and still have those same benefits as the meditation.
that's amazing. Yes, I think certainly it's a form of meditation, and especially for the busy mind or the person on the go all the time, it's going to be something that's easier for them to kind of ease into versus just sitting completely still in silence and being alone with themselves, which could be quite threatening.
Yeah.
How have you found is the best way to not like bookend the time period with stressful things? Do you do it first thing in the morning or do you do it at night? Like, what does it look like for you?
Yeah. So I've basically integrated it into my morning routine. So one of the things that I always do every day is I go up to my roof and take my glasses off to get sunlight in my eyes. So I was already doing 10 minutes of breath work every morning. So basically what I decided to do was tack it on to the end of my breath work. But if I'm stressed for time, because I tell myself I have to do a minimum of 10 minutes of Tai Chi, even though have to sounds very yang and masculine. So I'm like trying to watch the wording that I use when I talk about it. But my goal at minimum is 10 minutes of Tai Chi, ideally 20, because I do feel like I really start to get into it at that 10-minute mark. So basically what I've said is, if I only have 10 minutes, the breath work goes and I just do the Tai Chi. And if I have longer, I'll do a full or shorter breath work session with the Tai Chi. But regardless, I always had that time carved out in my morning anyway, because a lot of the work, and we talk about this in HLC too, is a lot of the work is also taking away things from people. So minimizing what they do, right? If you really look to see at the 4 doctor model, what people can do to start to to really take care of all 4 doctors, some of the best things they can do is start to remove things from their life. So instead of telling them they, should be eating a certain way, maybe it's that, it's like you should be, eating all this organic produce every day. Maybe it's they take away one processed food in the day, right? Or you're just starting to kind of like, maybe it's about reducing social activity so you have more introspective quiet time. What are the things that you can take away so you can give yourself more of that time to nourish and relax? Especially because we're in such a doing. So then, people will say, well, Elyse, I need a morning routine. And they add 5 things to their morning routine, and they're doing yoga and meditation and journaling and Tai Chi. And then they come back to me frazzled, being like, I don't have time to do all these things in my morning routine. And I say, yeah, I already thought it was a lot, but you wanted to do it. So let's actually take away. Let's reduce some of those things. You don't have to do all those things every day.
I love that. I actually just had a conversation with a client about this before we hopped on the call, because she was saying how she needs to do more so that she can do more to free up the time. But really, what you need to do is do less to free up the time instead of trying to like get ahead on things. Instead, maybe we can delegate things ideally, and only focus on the things that we really feel lit up by. That would be a good goal to have. Um,
Absolutely.
Delegate the things that we're not inspired by. But in addition to that, I am always telling clients, like, people are always looking for like what supplement to take, what thing to do to like improve their life and their health. But really, it's ideal to start with what things we can take away, because oftentimes it's the things that we're doing actively that are harming us and not things that we're not doing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And we just like that kind of goes into the magic bullet answer, right? Of like the absolutes is like, well, what supplement can I take to make myself feel better? And it's like, well, as long as your diet's crappy, as long as your sleep's crappy, your breathing's crappy, and you're not giving yourself any sort of nourishing practices and you're not moving well, no supplement is going to make a difference. Maybe you'll feel a little bit different from it, but it's not going to like totally change your life.
Totally. And people have such busy lives in like modern society that it makes more sense to remove things or swap things instead of adding more things, just to prevent that sense of overwhelm and actually lead to long-term adherence.
Right. Totally. Totally. And also we are so stuck in doing that we forget to listen to our intuition about what we're actually naturally good at.
Mhm.
So I think about I was thinking about this a lot because a few days ago, my friend Allison came over and she read my human design. So she does branding and marketing, but she actually does it based off of your human design, which
Love
is
that.
so cool, right? Because then she can take your inherent gifts and integrate them into what your branding and marketing looks like. So I've had astrology readings. I know very little bit about my human design, but this was really more of an opening. This really opened it up for me more to really understand who am I and what gifts do I have to offer in the world. And a lot of it was confirming what I already knew, but was afraid to do or felt like was wrong to do, or I didn't think was going to actually get me the results I wanted because of noise from everyone else and society and social media and things like that. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, my therapist says to me all the time, being sources doing, sources having.
Mm.
So just being and listening to yourself and being intuitive and nourishing yourself, sources action and actually doing the things that move you and you feel passionate about, which then sources having the things that you want. And all this time I've been fighting my natural instincts because I didn't think that's what people wanted to see or what was the right thing to do, or I thought I was going to be judged for it. So instead, I'm working so hard to try to get the results that I want that are coming a lot slower. And then I'm not having what I actually want. But this human design reading actually confirmed that if I just did the things that I know I'm good at intuitively and that are my natural gifts, I'll actually be excited about doing the actions that I need to take to get to the place I want to be. And it will actually result in having more. That
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. I feel like I spoke in like very like vague terms.
No, no, that was very powerful. And I think this is like the beauty of astrology and human design and all of these types of modalities in my mind is that they tend to tell us things that we already know at like a core level and give us some permission and confidence to pursue those directions, which can be so powerful when, like you said, we have all these different people in our ears. We're seeing all these people on social media doing their thing. And it's like, should I be doing that? Should I copy what they're doing to get their result? But no, we actually have to follow our own path to get the result that we want. It's not about emulating somebody else. Just because they did it a certain way doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it the same way. Same as like looking at somebody's body and being like, if I follow their exercise routine and diet, I'm going to look exactly like them. No, that's not how it works.
That's not how it works at all. And you and I know that very well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I realize this is a little contradictory of what we said earlier. We were talking about young people not working hard, not knowing the value of hard work. Like, like just
The
do it.
paradox, the grand paradox.
Yeah, yeah. Look, but also, it does, as you and I both know, it does take hard work to get to where you want to be also. But when you're excited about that work, at least it doesn't feel, most of the time, hopefully, it doesn't feel like work. I think the best thing, and I've heard this quote many times, is to, variations of this quote is to find things that you love so much that the work doesn't actually feel like work. So when you can really listen to yourself and figure out what excites you, then it might bring in more than you could have ever imagined. So I'm really, between the human design and the intuitive practices and the Tai Chi practices, this is a big shift for me right now in my life, because a lot of it has been about grinding away and working really hard and just not taking care of myself in order to do what I want to do. And now I want to see what happens when I start to lean into those intuitive, creative processes that I think that I think are inherently inside of me, and slow down and give myself the rest and the being and the stillness, and see what happens. And then I'll report back if it works.
I love that. I feel like I'm also in a similar place in my life where I'm really trying to be more and do less and just really focus on the things that feel like they light me up.
Yeah.
Uh, and I mean, it can also be scary because especially if you have your livelihood built around doing things a certain way, then like changing that, it's like, well, I need to survive. So it's like which
Yes,
stuff.
absolutely. And I know you spoke about that with Greg also. You touched on money and the survival portions of that with the archetypes. So it is scary. And I have to say, like, I don't know what the exact answer is in finding the balance. It is scary because we can't just totally abandon our lives. Did I say sometimes I'm like, oh, should I just move to a remote island and not need to make any money and like figure out how to live in the woods or the jungle or in the ocean, like whatever it is. But yeah, it's because of the way our society is structured. We're, if we want to live here and survive and have the lifestyles we want, we do have to make money. So how do we start to find that balance? And that's what I'm working through right now, is trying to figure that out for myself.
Yeah, money's a really weird one because it's like this weird contractual agreement that like we agree that this currency is a proxy for your value and your like the energy you're putting into the society, and it's like it's a construct, it's not real, but at another level it is very real, and it's so tied in with like our survival mechanisms for some reason, even though we didn't evolve with money as I mean, we evolved to actually provide real tangible value, not money, but now we have this proxy for value, which is
Right.
money, and it's just it's very it's a stressor that's almost completely ubiquitous.
It really is. Actually, it's so funny that we're talking about this because I'm going to share something with you. Right before our call, I had a call with a friend who is struggling with money, having some money stuff right now come up in her relationship.
Oh.
And she said that a lot of it had to do with her dad. She realized this just recently. And she realized there's all this repressed stuff that's below the surface that finally came out last week about money and her relationship to money and how it's coming out in her relationship with her partner and how it resembles what happened with her dad. So we did a little bit of a family constellation, right? This is literally right before our call, you and me getting on here. Um, and we realized that a lot of her stuff is coming up because her dad has so much of his own value and self-worth tied to money that when he would give money to her, it was like, show me love in exchange for me giving you this money. Like, I need to see the value in me because I'm giving you money. So she's been really wrapped up in this. And she said to me, she even though she did some somatic release practices, and she's also a holistic practitioner in our world, and she went to a craniosacral therapist and she had some stuff removed, she said she still has shoulder pain. So I literally just this just came in the mail last night. It's called, oh my gosh, it's called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of this. I've
You
heard of
know
this.
what it is? Okay. So I just got the reference guide because I was like, I don't want the whole book. I just want the reference guide. So I said to her, I said, what said your shoulder's an issue. So I looked up shoulders and it says shoulders resemble bearing burdens that don't belong to you, which makes sense because she's carrying the stuff from her dad. And then I said, which shoulder is it? She goes, the right one. I said, oh my gosh, it says the right shoulder relates to financial. So she had a shoulder pain, she had shoulder issues in her right shoulder since she's realized all these things about money. The pain is still there. And it's all related. It's all related. So I don't know if I made like, did I make sense just now?
Yeah.
Basically, yeah, okay. Right. So she's having these financial issues. She's having right shoulder pain. And according to this book, Feelings Buried Alive Never Die, which basically tell you what physical symptoms are associated with what emotional symptoms are associated with your physical symptoms. Right shoulder issues are related to financial. And I was like, that is so crazy.
Well, the other crazy thing that you bring up this story is that I had a similar realization about 2 weeks ago with the way that I interact with money. And I saw like so strikingly that I was basically repeating this pattern that like I saw my other family members doing, like specifically my mom and my grandma, where they didn't have any boundaries around money and they would just basically spend all of their money on the people they love until they're like, there's no money left.
Oh my gosh. And then you see
Yes.
yourself doing it too.
Yes.
Wow. It is the inherited, and I've done family constellations for myself around money. And it's just so interesting that we really inherit our family's thoughts and beliefs around money, even
Totally.
if it's intentional or not, or even if it's overt or not.
Yeah.
Wow.
Weird.
Wow. So what are you going to do about it? Like, what?
I don't know yet. I just been coming to terms with like, wow, that's like a real pattern that clearly is like lineage based. So
Yeah.
trying to figure out what to do about it.
Oh my gosh. And these are things also that I think are really, and I integrate this into my practice, but I think they're really important things to look at when you're working with clients and thinking about your own obstacles and struggles is that, right, a lot of us engage in behaviors and patterns that we don't necessarily understand why, and we can't always trace back to past traumas from this lifetime, but they could actually be generational, that they're coming from. And Mark Wallen's book talks about this. It didn't start with you, who Paul had on his podcast. Also, my coach trained directly under Mark, who I've been working with for my somatic family constellation coach I worked with for the last 2+ years. So I've really dove deep into a lot of this, and I really bring it into sessions with clients, especially like, I have clients who have chronic health issues, and like I have one client I had who all 4 grandparents were Holocaust survivors, right? So really thinking about like, where is this coming from, and what other things from before us are impacting us, and then we bring the unconscious to the conscious, and then as Carl Jung says, we don't let it drive us and then call it fate.
Yes, absolutely. And this is where it also can be tricky with like being able to tease apart what your intuition is versus what your like traumas, whether they're generational or in your lifetime, like
Yeah.
what's speaking to you, because sometimes the voice that is maybe masquerading as your intuition could also be from your ego from like this trauma response.
Totally. And that is where it gets really confusing sometimes, right? Like I have patients who come to a lot of anxiety and it's like, well, what's intuitive and what's just anxiety? And that's where the somatic practices are so valuable. And I'm sure you spoke about this on your episode with Matt of like when you can actually go into your body and not be afraid to feel these things and start to be with them and let them metabolize, then you can really start to see, okay, where am I experiencing this from a place of fear, and what is coming up for me, and is my body safe right now? Can I distinguish between safety, lack of safety from the past, and whether I'm safe in the present moment? And when you're using your intuition, you and you're using soul connection, like Angie said in the class, when you practice soul connection, you want to be well rested, you want to feel safe, you want to be nourished, right? You don't want to practice soul connection on like you're starving and you're exhausted and you're stressed out. So that's a really great time to then go in and ask yourself, is this actually anxiety? Kind of like take a break from what life is what's happening right now, give yourself what you need, and then go back from a safe space and find out, is this anxiety because I don't want to do this thing? Is it anxiety from past trauma? Is it anxiety from inherited trauma? And you could ask your soul, like, where is it coming from? But you really can't ask your soul from an unsafe place, because then it won't give you the answer that you need to hear.
Yeah, or you can't even hear it because there's these other things that are speaking so loudly that they're dulling out the like the core message.
Exactly. But I'll tell you, like, I'll share this with the audience, is that ever since I was a child, I had a terrifying fear of pregnancy, like terrifying. And I never really understood why, because even though I have a history of physical abuse, I never had a history of sexual abuse as far as I know. And it just didn't make sense, right? A child, like I had like nightmares as a child that I was pregnant. Like that doesn't really, it doesn't really make sense. So it occurred to me after doing all this work, I had this thought all of a sudden, all this inherited family trauma work. I was like, this doesn't feel like it's mine. Like maybe it actually is someone else's. So having that knowledge, and then along with the work of doing the somatic practices and learning how to be in my body, I then had this moment of, wait a minute, like actually, I've been sitting here thinking I have a problem or whatever, quote unquote problem, but actually maybe it came from somebody else, inherited. So I went to my coach and I said this to her. I said, this doesn't feel like it's mine actually. And she tested it and she uses the pendulum and all these things. And she said, it's actually karmic. She said it
Wow.
was that when I was in a past life, I had a pregnancy that I needed to get an abortion, and it was illegal at the time to get abortions. And I went to a guy that was supposed to be reputable, a back alley, guy. And he actually secretly thought that women getting abortions were terrible people. And he botched the surgery intentionally, and I died. Yeah.
Oh
Is that
my
crazy?
God.
I don't know how your audience is going to take this story. Like, I
No,
think I
this is gold. This is like the best podcast ever today.
be like, okay, we're out. These girls crazy. But it just like, it made sense to me. Right? Because why would I have this terrifying fear of pregnancy from a young age? Like something must have happened in previous life or in an ancestor. And then I did actually learn that my great grandmother had I think I learned after that, after sharing that with a cousin, that she had an illegal abortion too. So, but I had never known about. No, it was my great great grandmother. It was my great great grandmother. So that's all. She did not die though from the abortion, but it was just really interesting experience. And I'm still working through it, but it just, that once again, making the unconscious conscious, it really does help make a difference to understand where things are coming from, so then you can really start to make an effort to change them and engage in practices.
Absolutely. And I mean, this even applies when you walk into a room and there's a bunch of people in the room and you start to feel some type of way, like the energy is off. Like, if you don't trust your body's signals, you could think that, you're just feeling that way because you feel self-conscious or you feel nervous or whatever it is. But maybe you're actually picking up on somebody else's energy that's in that room. And if you don't develop like the skills to be able to differentiate between those things, then you may just walk around thinking there's something wrong with you when it's actually you're just very sensitive.
Yes. Oh, and I have a lot to say about that from the class also. So Angie talked a lot about finding your soul family and your soul people and your soul mate. And something that really struck me was her discussion around being your true authentic self, because that's how you're going to attract those soul people into your life. And
Mhm.
as someone who struggles with people pleasing and wanting to be liked, right? And also kind of that Libra. I think it might be the Libra-ness of right we talked about this in the
Yes,
last
it is.
episode, that like changing, being able to like be a chameleon and change kind of to accommodate other people, and not from a inauthentic place, but just having that ability, you know, to hear that from Angie,
Who's also a Libra.
who's also a Libra. Yes. As soon as I found out about that, I was like, yeah, I have to work with her. That's like one of the reasons. I was like, oh, no wonder I resonate with her so much. But it was just a wake up call to me of, yes, this is why I have to be my true authentic self, because then I am bringing in the right people into my life. And then if I really have that strong sense of intuition and soul connection, then you walk into a room and you feel that energy. And maybe that those just aren't your people. And that's okay. And that's how you attract all the right people into your life. And Angie even said, us, the 9 people in this room who took the class, like there's some sort of a soul connection here. I mean, I remember the last day we had one of the students in the class, one of my peers in the class was our example. We basically went through all the paperwork of, how it's like, you learn all this information the first 4 days, and then how do you actually implement it and put into action? So here, one of our peers becomes the patient, and we go through all of their issues and what they're struggling with and blah, 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 blah. I am not kidding you. I identified, it was a male peer of mine. I identified with maybe 90% of his struggles in some way. Okay, in some shape or form. It might not have been like the exact thing, but he he even he said something about he couldn't do sleepovers when he was a kid because he was too afraid to go over people's houses. I also could not do sleepovers as a kid because I was afraid to go over sleep over people's houses. I mean, it was crazy.
If you want to
Like
hear a quick story really quick, just
yeah.
very brief, I used to basically be the same way, except I would go to the people's houses and then I would call my mom at like 1 a.m. to come pick me up. Hysterical.
The kids, my friend's mom would find me crying in the sleeping bags after everyone went to sleep, and I'm up alone, being I'm alone.
I was like, the vibe just isn't right. I need to leave. It's just felt like I shouldn't be there.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Oh my, I guess this happened to more of us than we realize.
Well, we're all soul family, so it makes
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Exactly. So that was just so wild to me, because when we were deciding who we were going to use as the sample patient, it was literally between me and this guy. So I didn't get chosen because I didn't finish all my paperwork on time. So he got chosen. And I was like, oh, this is such a bummer, because if I'm the patient, then I get to actually figure out what I need to do to fix, to heal some of the issues that I'm having. And instead, this guy was the patient, and he had 90% of the same issues as me. So
wow.
I ended up learning so much about myself by using him as the example in the class. And, it's really cool because it's no accident that these people come into your life. And even, I think I shared this with you. One of my peers in the class I had known already because he lives near me. You know him too. You've met him before. I'm not gonna use his name, but I know he won't mind me sharing this story. I had met him a few times and hung out with him just in the last 2 years. And I was like, oh, this guy gets under my skin. I don't like hanging out with him. And we would hang out in group settings. So it wasn't I was hanging out with him one-on-one. So I would go to the group and hang out with the group. But I was like, oh, this guy just irritates me. He irritates me. I don't know why, but he really does. And then I saw a list of who was attending the class, the HLC2 class, and his name was on the list. And I was like, oh, damn it. And he wants to share the house with me. He wants to be one of the 6 people living in the same house as me. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. I gotta hang out with this guy all week long. I can't stand him. I can't tell you why I can't stand him, but I just can't stand him. So then I find out him and I have flights to California from JFK at the same time, just different airlines. So I was like, whatever, let's just like go to the airport together. So we meet up, we go on public transportation together, we get to the airport, split off, go on our planes, get to the San Diego airport at the same time, and Uber to the house together. And to, save money, it's an over an hour Uber drive. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what gets to, then during the week, he's kind of like saying things to me. Like he made a comment about my practice. Well, maybe you should do things this way in your practice. And maybe you should, and that like really got under my skin. I was like, this guy, and he's just like so blunt and honest and just like says it how it is. And that really bothered me, probably because I'm not so good at doing that myself. Right. And in the first day of class, Angie says, the people who trigger you are here to teach you the most. And I'm sitting there thinking, this guy's in class and he triggers me a ton. And now I got to sit with him for the rest of the week. And I don't know how I'm going to deal with it. And he's going to say shit that really pisses me off.
And you got called out immediately. And she's like, lesson 1. Boom.
He's speaking to me. I have to tell you, by the end of class, I had such an appreciation for this guy. I told him this. He knows this whole story. So that's why I don't think he'll care that I'm sharing it. I'm just not going to use his name. I had such an appreciation for him. I was like, you know what? He's honest. He's blunt. He says it how it is, but he also is compassionate and loving and caring. And I really appreciate that. And I got to know him more as a person and understand him more other than those few times I hung out with him in a group setting. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that I live so close to him because now I get to hang out with him when I go back to New York. Like,
I love this.
right? It's just, you really, when you open your heart and you open your mind and you open your soul to opportunity, you never know what's going to come of it. And him and I, like, we talked about this, which was cool, is like, we had an actual conversation where I said to him at the end, I was like, you really got under my skin. Like you really get under my skin sometimes. And I don't know why. And he said, well, the people, he's so cool and chum. He's like, well, the people, what Angie said, the people who trigger you are here to teach you the biggest lessons. And I was like, he's just like not even fazed by the fact that I am annoyed by him. And I'm like, yeah. So you really that's the cool thing about being around people like this who are so open-minded. Your friends, like me, my friends, like you really grow and learn from your soul family and your soul connections. And they were brought into your life for a reason. And sometimes I can't even believe these things are coming out of my mouth because there were like never things that I actually really were taught to believe. These are all, new beliefs and experiences for me. But I love that, if someone is around you and triggering you, like ask yourself, what about, I always tell my patients, remember, point one finger at someone, you're pointing 3 back at yourself. What is it about that person that is annoying you or upsetting you? And is there something, is any of those things inside of you?
Yeah, because it ultimately has to be they're eliciting some sort of reaction from you. It's you that's doing the reacting. So why is that happening? There must be something there to explore and to learn from. Which is
Yeah.
powerful. And that's why like relationship in general, whether it's friendships or intimate relationships, are such powerful teachers because they bring you into like close proximity with somebody, especially if it's someone like you're living with, you're seeing them every day. Shit's gonna come up that's gonna bug you, and you're gonna have fights and you're gonna have conflict and you're gonna learn and grow so much from that. Avoiding it's not a feasible option if your goal is to like, grow and actualize yourself and lead a meaningful life, because you actually need those moments as like a catalyst to get you into your next version of yourself.
Right. Exactly. And that's the best, is when you have a partner or you have friends who are also open to discussing what's going on, right? The fact that this guy was so open to hearing me say to him, you trigger me and you really irritate me. And he's able to just sit there and not take it personally. I mean, that's very rare to have someone sit there and not take it personally. But that's part of the believing that your soul family will come to you and that the other people will leave and they're not right for you at this time. But to be able to have that conversation in itself, I really grew from that. And I think these things are so powerful. Like you said, like when you're with a partner and you're triggering each other and you're growing and learning from each other. And I wish there was more conversation around this in friendships. You know, my friend Lisa and I talk about this idea of conscious friendshipping. Like I tell her she should start a course called conscious friendshipping, where because you can so grow and heal in the context of friendships, but we don't talk about it, right? Like you might go to couples therapy with your partner. And I'm not saying that friends necessarily need to go to friends therapy, but like, why can't we have a conversation about how you're triggering me and I'm triggering you, but also how this friendship is so healing and loving because it's nourishing and it creates a safe space to grow and share.
Totally. And the thing that people typically do is just like ghost that friend or like phase them out of their life instead of actually dealing with the muck.
Yes. Yes. And it's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. And quite frankly, for me, it's the most upsetting thing when that happens, because I just wish that the person would be willing to have a conversation with me about it.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you can't learn from that or you don't have that learning opportunity because you don't know what you did to upset them. They don't know what they did to upset you. It's like you just completely miss the growth opportunity there. And
100%.
obviously it is easier to not deal with that stuff, but it's what's expedient isn't what's meaningful typically, as Jordan Peterson would say.
Exactly. Oh, Jordan Peterson. What a guy.
I was actually thinking about him earlier too because he also in his like he has a learning program. It's like the future self authoring or something like this. It's called.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, he has you identify what you want to run away from and what you want to run towards, like what your goal is, but also basically what your nightmare is, like what Paul talks about, and
Yeah.
he uses that as a way to help somebody shape like the trajectory of their life, like what their big dream is and where they want to go.
Yes. Totally. Totally. Yeah. I've heard I've, my mentor was talking about that like years ago. I never actually did it, the self-authoring program. We should look into it.
We should look into it actually. He's on tour starting very soon, and he's going to be in Philly and New York. Actually, I was thinking about going because I never seen him live.
I was gonna message you when I saw that. I know. I would totally be down to go see him.
It's actually so funny. Right before he blew up with like the whole Canada scandal and like the
Yeah.
issue, he did a very small, intimate seminar at Lafayette College. A week, like I found him and I was like obsessed with his work. And then it was a few weeks and I looked back at like his schedule. He had some like gatherings that he had been hosting and he was at Lafayette College. It was a room of like 20 people. He was giving a lecture and it was like meet and greet after and
Wait,
like
shut up. Do you know what year it was?
it must have been like 2017.
Oh, so it was after I graduated. But that's crazy.
Well, I lived in Bethlehem at the time, so I was literally 15 minutes away, and I was so mad. I was like, "How did
Oh my gosh, you're like, how did I know if I could have met him back then? I know. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Well, had I known, I would have gone as an alumni to laugh at.
oh, small world,
Right.
right? Like Lafayette College of all places, a really small school. Like it's great, but it's tiny."
Right. So
Yeah,
tiny.
yeah.
Wow. That's wild. Okay, we're gonna have to look at the tour dates. I was looking at them. So we're gonna take a look and see if we should go. But yeah, I mean, when you really that's what I love about people like Jordan Peterson and Paul Chek is that they really reframe how we think about things in life and challenge the way we think about things in life and teach us about that unlearning process and getting in touch with ourselves and really understanding ourselves and bringing that once again that unconscious to the conscious and the never ending growth, right? Because the only constant in life is change. So it's probably best to not resist it and keep moving forward.
I love that, and I feel like there's a lot of parallels between Jordan and Paul. I've thought about this before. I feel like they're both very polarizing, and they're kind of like love it or hate it. And they're also people that are like people judge very quickly without actually being familiar with their work, which
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah. And they're just, I mean, obviously I've never met Jordan, but obviously I met Paul and he's just such a loving, really warm soul and his energy. I have to tell you, his energy is unreal. When he came and lectured to us the last day of class, first of all, I was bawling, like tears just streaming down my face. I felt like he was talking right at me. I want to share some of the things he shared, by the way. I
please.
have to reference my notes, but this is a man you can tell. from his energy is just so enlightened. Like his presence, you feel it in the
Mhm.
room. I've never experienced anything like that before. I mean, it could have been that in my mind, he's the biggest celebrity ever. He's the only, but there's just, and even when I said to him, like, Paul, I need you to pinch me right now, he came over and gave me the biggest hug and kiss on my cheek, and just
Aw.
really, really beautiful. But I want to share, I'm going to pull up my notes because I really want to share some of the things that he spoke about. Is that okay?
Please do. We would love that. Yes.
Okay. So I have to find them. I have so many notes.
I can imagine.
Um, oh my gosh. Okay. So I really like this. He talked about the 4 types of clients you will ever work with. Have you come across this yet or
I think
no?
so. It sounds familiar, but please
Okay.
tell the audience and remind
So
me.
yeah, so he's I'm like, obviously, like, I'm like, if anyone's heard any of this, it's Alexis. Like, you could pass it. I should have had you take my HLC2 test because I
I
was
want
like,
to.
crap, I should have called you up, but I had to take it because I was like, damn it, I need help with this. Okay.
It was
The
like, why did Paul's soul guide him to not eat meat for a year?
like, we'll tell the audience, like, I was taking, I mean, I hope no one from HLC is from the Chek Institute is listening to this, but I didn't realize I need to take all these prerequisites for HLC too. So they basically threatened to like not let me come unless I finished them, and I got an extension. So I was like I was going through them really fast. I wasn't actually like thoroughly watching the videos, even though I'm upset that I didn't have the time to do it because there's such good information. So then I'm taking the quizzes and I just kept guessing and failing them. And one of them was like, why did right? What was the question was, why did Paul's soul guide him to not eat meat for a year? And I'm like answering it wrong. And then I call Alexis and she's like, to rid him of animal spirits. And I was
To
like,
elevate his consciousness, of course.
I was like, and then I pressed that one. I'm like, oh, that was the answer. Like, I like had to like I literally chose every other multiple choice answer except that one. But you know him so well. Like Paul, we're gonna make Paul trivia and then send it to him.
A Paul bingo board. Yes.
Oh my
Trivia.
gosh, we should totally make a Paul bingo board.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. I also love, I wanted to share this with the audience that you were like, get Paul's date of you were like, I
Oh,
have birth. I need, and I know where he grew, I know where he was born.
I know where he was born, when he was born. I just need the time.
I was like talking to Paul. I'm like so like enamored that I'm talking to this guy. And then I'm like, by the way, I just my friend really needs to know your time of birth so she could do your astrological chart. So, oh my gosh, I love him so much. Okay, so the 4 types of clients you will ever work with. 1, those who listen to wise counsel, do what is suggested, and heal efficiently and effectively. Number 2, those whose egos are so big, they will never listen to anyone and don't follow instructions. They stay in pain and go from one problem to another and one expert to another until the pain teacher loves them and they may become a 1, which we just discussed, or a 3, the next one. Number 3, those who are so identified with their pathology or illness that they fear healing because they won't know who they are, which he calls a crisis of the soul. That's really interesting. And then 4, those whose time has come and no therapeutic intervention will save them. Their soul's work is complete in this lifetime.
Wow.
So I think that's really powerful because, as practitioners, obviously we have these skill sets and we want to help people, but as we know, we can't save people. And I don't know about you, but sometimes like my ego gets bruised and I'm working on this where I'm like, oh my gosh, like, am I a bad therapist if I couldn't help them, blah, blah, blah. And the reality is like, well, A, it could not be a good fit. B, maybe my modalities aren't right for them. But C, also like, it can be that they're not the first type of patient, the one who listens to wise counsel and heals effectively, and that there's something else that's meant for their soul in this life. And the pain teacher is there to maybe teach them something else so I think that's important to know. And people are so stuck. I've seen it where people come in and they're just like so stuck and identifying with their pain, their emotional pain, their mental pain, their physical pain. And I don't think they'd know who they are if they didn't have that pain. And
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
Sorry.
No word to say.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I've seen this so much, just like in my personal life with people who dealt with chronic illnesses and are so identified with like my insert illness here and like so closely identified with this thing. And without it, like maybe it's bringing them some affection or love from people around them and getting them attention. And without it, they wouldn't know who they are, especially if it's been a very long-term illness. And
Yeah.
that's always very, very hard to see because there is a part of, I'm sure both of us and most people who are in the business of helping people, where you do kind of want to step in and save this person, but it's just not possible.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. Obviously, number one is like the dream client. Like if everybody's like that, like, hey, we're in business, like we're gonna be feeling really good about ourselves. But
Absolutely.
are not in that camp, which I mean, there are some, of course, which is amazing when that happens. It feels very rewarding for everybody involved.
Yeah.
The number twos, remind me what the number two was?
Number two is those whose egos are so big they will never listen to anyone and don't follow instructions. They stay in pain and go from one problem to another and one expert to another until the pain teacher loves them and they maybe become the first one. Um,
Yes. So
or the,
the thing that reminded me of is that like everybody kind of has a different threshold of pain at which they'll be willing to like actually make change to get rid of that pain.
yeah,
And some people will literally die before they reach that threshold, which is also very
yes.
sad.
Which is number four then, which is
Exactly.
so yeah, it's true. It's true. And we feel so stuck. And I had one client I worked with for quite some time who made really very he made some progress, but it was very, very minimal and very, very slow until he decided to stop coming. And I'd actually ask myself every week, I'm like, why is he coming back? Like I'm like, but there is benefit to the therapeutic relationship, right? That we don't always see as practitioners that's serving a purpose, even if the patient or client isn't doing the work. And something I would ask him eventually once we working together for quite some time and built a nice rapport, I said, what do you think your soul is here to learn in this lifetime? And that was just like the question just kind of like blew him out of the chair because it was something he had never thought about before. And he was so stuck in his pain and really like trapped in this pathology and identification with it that I think to ask him that, it really forced him to zoom out a bit and actually say like, well, what is it? And unfortunately, I think he's still, even despite asking, it was really still hard for him.
Hmm. And that
So,
might be somebody's life path, which is really hard to grapple with. That we're
right.
on different paths, and some of these paths are brutal.
Yeah, they really are. They really, really are. And that's why the past life methodology or theory or whatever you want to call it is I really like it because it reminds me that first of all, when we go, there's other opportunities, but also that there is a purpose to this time here. And the suffering that we might experience is supposed to be meaningful and supposed to teach us things and have us grow from it. So even though when bad things happen and we're really upset about it, if we can reframe it a bit and just remind ourselves that part of life is coming up against struggles and hardship and pain and trauma, and that we are meant to experience it for a larger reason and greater purpose, that it has value as much as it does suck.
Hmm. Also, the patient fours also kind of bring up some thoughts around like how much of this is predetermination versus like what's karma, what do we have control over, even
Ah,
like this all happening to us, do we have any control over this at all?
right. I know. I think about that too all the time. Like also with astrology, right? Like, well, it's not astrology is not it's not psychic readings, but you're kind of like, okay, like if this stuff is meant to happen, like I'm obviously taking action on some things and not taking action on others. And like, is taking action part of that path, or is it like my choice to take action? Or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Paul had a really great homeopath on his podcast. I can't remember his name. He was on a couple times, but he was amazing. But he brought up the difference between like freedom of choice and freedom of will. And I thought that was really important because, I mean, he argued, if I remember correctly, that we have freedom of choice, but not really freedom of will, because our will would be like an urge to do something. But then whether we decide to choose and act on that is a different story. Like we do have that freedom of choice, but whether or not we have like that urge or that instinct to do something could be completely independent of us.
That's really good. Yeah. Wow. It's just so wild.
It is. Life is a
Oh,
freaking trip.
it really is. It's a crazy adventure roller coaster.
It is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I wanted
So
to ask you, looping back briefly, do you have any resources for people if they're interested in incorporating a Tai Chi practice? Were you given stuff at HLC too, or did you find any resources that would be good to help like learn some beginning moves?
yeah, so that is a good question because they didn't really share they didn't really share a ton of outside news. There may be reading, so I can go back and look, but there are I believe that some of these movements are in How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy.
Oh, great. Oh, would they be like the working in
The
exercises?
working in exercises, exactly. And my friend Billy actually has a really good Qigong video that he made like 20 years ago on YouTube that I really like. So if you want a link to that,
That would be
you
great.
you can send that. I played around with that before I even did Paul's class. I was, you know, working on my yin and trying to that was back when I was yanging my yin and I was like, oh, I got to do some Tai Chi or Qigong. So I really liked his video. So I can share that because he used to be an instructor back in the day. And it's so funny. He actually said he's not wearing a shirt in the video. And he said like up until then, he like rarely got any views on YouTube and he always struggled. And someone was like, just do the video topless. And then everything took off after that.
It's funny how that works. I wonder if it's like the algorithm or if
Oh my
people are
God.
self-selecting that more.
Right, right. And yeah, I'll never forget that story when he told me that. I have I'm going to be sharing more on my Instagram as well, some practices that I've been doing. I have, like I said, the energy pushes on there, but I did make a few videos of a few other movements that we learned. So I definitely will share those as well on social media. So then
Yay.
people use them. And then really, just all you really need to do, you don't even need to pick a consistent movement. It can be a free flowing dance if you want, right? And I know this isn't comfortable for a lot of people if they've never danced before or they've never done any sort of practice like this, but just, moving your body and then breathing, like inhaling, moving in one direction, exhaling, moving in the other direction, and just as slow as you can. And they said, the slower you go, the more the chi flows.
Hmm.
So really I like to just listen to my body and see where it wants to take me.
I love that.
Yeah, I probably look like a crazy person on my roof. I'm like laying on the floor, rolling around and breathing. I'm not kidding. This morning, I was literally laying and rolling. I was like, oh, some nice vestibular
Uh,
training, like breathing with rolling and just seeing where your body feels like it wants to move, right? Maybe it's a little achy in the back and you want to do a little bit of a standing back stretch and you just breathe with it. And maybe you want to practice even just by slow stretching and focus. I mean, this is really yoga, right? Is like slow stretching and focusing on your breathing with the movement, but very, very, keep it basic, keep it simple to
I
make it
love
easy
that.
to do.
I love
Yeah.
that. I just posted in my stories earlier. I was hanging out with the cat and I was just thinking like how much animals can teach us. And
Yeah.
you'll see them, they move intermittently, they stretch, if they get scared, they shake it off. Like they have all these patterns
Yes.
built in that like they know how to deal with stress and they know how to balance their bodies. And we just are so detached because we're so much in our heads and not in our bodies that if we can reconnect to that wisdom, our bodies will move us the way we need to be moved.
Exactly, 100%. Ellen Vora talks about this in her book about the shaking it off, right? Like, because we are meant to shake and release trauma. If you ever stub your toe and the instinct is to like shake it, but then you're around other people, so you don't do it because you're being socially conditioned. And then where is that trauma vibrating up into the rest of your body and being stored there? And it is, I think about this all the time, how much I inhibit myself from how much we probably all do inhibit ourselves from doing things that we want to do because they look weird or what would people think and how would we be judged. But yeah, I love watching animals move for that reason because they're just so instinctual.
Yes, it's beautiful. And oh my
Yeah.
God, speaking of like inhibiting, like you could think about just like crying and specifically for men, like it blocking that and like shutting down those channels because it's socially unacceptable, like how immensely harmful that could be.
So mentally harmful. Oh my gosh. I even have patients who will start to cry in session and they're like, I'm so
I
sorry.
know, they're like
And I say,
apologizing.
No, I think let it out. This is
Great,
what. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I had a patient who's been stuffing so much inside, so much fear, so much pain. And she started to cry last week and she started to apologize. And I said, no, like, have you even had an opportunity to cry about this? And she said, no. I said, well, you got to let it out now then. Like, this is the place to let it out. And it's a reaction, it's a response to something inside of us. And think about how crappy it feels when you hold back your tears.
My throat swells up immediately
Yes,
when I hold back.
100%. Or think about how crappy it feels when you try to hold in a sneeze.
Yep.
You know, it's like the same thing. It's your body's output of something happening and it's trying to release. And then we're like, no, 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 stuff it back in. You don't need to release. Well, where do we think it's going to go? You know, like it's
Totally. I mean, crying is just, I've always viewed it as like just a way to move energy. It's just another form of moving energy, the way moving your body could be, or shouting or screaming or whatever it is. They're all just different modalities to accomplish something similar, and there's no shame in that whatsoever. It's very weird.
100%. Oh
No
my
shame.
gosh. And I'm like the biggest, I mean, I don't even want to use the term crybaby, but like I cry all the time. Like, I'm not kidding you.
Same.
There was one time I literally like walked through Times Square sobbing and then sat on the floor of Port Authority for an hour just sobbing until the police officer came over and was like, ma'am, you can sit, you can be here, but you can't sit on the floor. You can basically stand crying, but you can't like sit on the floor. I was just on the floor of Port Authority crying. But the amount of times I have been out in public settings with like a relative or an ex-boyfriend and I get upset and I start crying and they're just like, really? Like, are you going to do this now? Or like, why are you crying? There's no reason to cry. Like, so like they're embarrassed of me crying. And I'm not saying that I cry every time I go out to eat. Like, that's what I was saying. But like, if I'm going through a hard time or something is upsetting or triggering, like I tend to let it out. I'm pretty like, I just let out my tears, but other people are like, it's like now not only should you be ashamed if you're crying, but now the people around you who are associated with you are ashamed if you're crying. And it's so awful.
I really think that's a reflection of like when somebody is not very secure in themselves and they have like this like issues with self-security, then when somebody's crying around them, they're thinking that, oh, other people are going to think that I made them cry and like that I'm a bad person and I'm going
Right.
to be socially ostracized. Therefore, you need to stop crying because you're making me look bad.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Oh my gosh, that's so true. That's so true. Yeah. But I think honoring ourselves and really listening to what we need and what our bodies need. And this is the same, right? The urge to cry just as much as there might be an urge to eat
Yeah.
or an urge to use the bathroom. My brother actually said, I was with my brother for 10 days in Florida, and he said to me, I just got back this week. He said he was listening to a podcast that said, what, like, we don't like pee on a schedule. Why do we eat on a schedule? I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on that, like from
Yeah.
a biology perspective. Like, do you think we should eat on a schedule from a circadian rhythm? That makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point. There's certainly like pros and cons, I would say, to eating on a schedule versus not. So like for a pro would be like if you're eating at the same time every day, then your kind of digestive juices and your hormones are like all prepared for you to eat at that time of day so that it's kind of ready to digest the food. So maybe it could be more efficient in that way. But there's definitely the case that like for intermittent fasting in women and just in general, like it tends to work in the beginning and then it becomes really challenging metabolically, like the basal metabolic rate starts to fall, and it's because you're basically restricting when your body actually desired food and you're kind of bypassing that impetus or that urge to eat. You're
Yeah.
overriding your own signals. So there is certain, I mean, when you feel hungry, that's a great time to eat. Um, but I mean, that's definitely not the only cue. I mean, eating is complicated because there's like
Yeah.
social aspects, biological aspects, pleasure aspects. It's like this such a multifaceted
It is.
activity that we engage in.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so hard because it's like I have this one friend in Florida, and when I stayed with her, I love her so much. She just like does whatever she wants. And she's like, I don't want to eat on a schedule. She's like, if you want to eat lunch, whatever you want to eat lunch, eat it. I want to eat lunch when I want to eat lunch. And I was like, okay, like that's so true because it's like the worst. And obviously there are social things, right? You make plans to go out to dinner with a friend. You're going to eat on a schedule with like whatever schedule you time yourself. But it's the worst. Like when you have dinner at like 7, but at 6, you're starving. And then you start eating, snacking, and then your snack turns into a meal. And then you go to your dinner and you're not even hungry anymore.
Totally. Totally, totally. Yeah. So there is like this weird dance between like the social aspects and the biological aspects that can be difficult to navigate, especially if on top of that you also have issues with like food allergies or intolerances that'll also give you some fear around eating, especially eating out, because that could create like a stress response. You don't know if you're going to get sick from the meal. And then that's also going to further impair your ability to digest the food and may make it more likely that you have an issue with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that is so, so, so true. And this is where it's nuanced, right? It's not black and white.
Exactly, exactly.
There
It's
are all
really,
these
really
factors.
hard to make generalizations about any of this stuff, which I mean, there's beauty in that, but it's also more challenging. But it's also there is plenty of information and guidance around what individuals can do to optimize their health, and that's where it comes into like working with a practitioner like you or me or anybody else who's in our circles who are equipped to deal with the nuance and be able to like prescribe and detail the steps that somebody would have to take to feel their best. So I think that's at least the encouraging part. Do
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
you have any other things that you would like to share from the course before we sign off?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I want to dive into not too much because I know we're close to 2 hours,
Oh,
but
no worries.
I I want to talk about what Paul said about ADHD that like really made me cry. So, and some other things. So he said, I'm sorry, I have to look at my notes for a second.
No worries.
I'm going to start with this actually, not about ADHD. He said something really interesting about endometriosis.
Oh, let's hear it.
Yeah, I don't have this diagnosis, but there are a lot of women who do, and I feel like it's becoming more common. So he said he calls it successful white woman's disease.
Mm.
Women who are too yang, too masculine energy. And in true Paul style, he said, offensive style, they are men with breasts.
Oh my God, I love it.
This is the only podcast I can like repeat.
I love it.
Paul says so he said, like high profile ass kicker women, the soul and the spirit cannot be separated. Spirit is the flow of energy and information, the consciousness. Spirit is said to take. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm like reading my notes and I'm not sure if they make sense. I was like vigorously typing.
Huh?
Said to take course, but soul had the experience of learning in the course. So I found that really interesting about the endometriosis because do you work with a lot of endometriosis?
Not a lot, but I've had a couple clients with endo.
Okay. Would you say they meet that profile or not really?
I definitely one of them comes to mind that would, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I also have worked with someone who meets that profile too. So it was just really interesting. So and then he said what was really interesting is that this now we're transitioning to different issues that Paul had so many food intolerances growing up, and he believes it was because his father was so abusive at the kitchen table, at the dinner table.
Wow, I bet. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So that was really interesting. Um, and that, we link the smell and taste in childhood with the fear.
Mhm.
So it's causing these allergies.
Mentioned that if you're getting a stress response while you're eating, it's going to potentially make your gut more permeable than it would have otherwise, which increases the probability for these food antigens to interact with immune cells and create the whole cascade that can like generate intolerances.
100%. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And then he said, when kids are in an environment where it's unsafe to relax, that can usually result in ADHD.
Mm.
So the child's unconscious programming is that it's not safe. The child has picked up on a lot of imagery, feelings, and programs. So that like if dad's abusive and he's wearing a white shirt today, that maybe if he's wearing a white shirt another day, he might be abusive. And there's just this constant like chaos in the home happening. And that's really when like the tears were streaming down my face, because that was so much of my childhood. And I actually think that I've lived most of my life with undiagnosed ADHD. I think they just diagnosed me with all the other issues, like the anxiety and depression and PTSD and OCD and eating disorders. And I was always a good student, so I never really got diagnosed with ADHD. But then I'm realizing it more and more that I have it. But it really makes sense that, you know, if you're growing up in a household where there's constant chaos and constant lack of prediction, and you're always like going back and forth and really feeling unsafe, that it could also, as we know, that results in trauma, and it can result in a slew of other issues. But the connection to the ADHD also I found really, really interesting there.
That's
Um,
really interesting. Also, like, lack of safety can come in so many different flavors too, and from so many different avenues. Like, I'm thinking also, if our kids are sitting on screens, you know, at nighttime, for example, and they're getting blasted with blue light, that's turning on their stress response as well. Um,
yeah.
that's going to create a like a physiological unsafety, or a sense of unsafety in that context as well. So you could totally see how the screens could play into that too, in addition to, you know, whatever relational traumas they might also be experiencing.
Yeah, totally true. Oh my gosh, so, so interesting. Oh, and then he said the same sex. So if we have, you know, two parents and you have a mother and a father, he says the same sex parent. So if you're a woman, if you're a girl, your mother teaches you how to engage in the outer world, and the opposite sex parent teaches you how to engage in the inner world.
Mm.
Is saying that for a woman, a young woman, father's way of being will have the biggest influence on how she relates to herself, and the mother will show her how to navigate the outside world.
That makes sense. I think I actually heard on one of his podcasts, like it's also Jungian work, is like the anima and the animus. The anima is like the female, but all men have an internal environment that's the anima, which is like the female, and then all women have like the masculine animus inside of them. So it's like whatever the opposite is, that's like your driving
Yeah.
internal force. So that totally resonates with that. Did he mention anything about like what about families who have like a household of like a single parent? Did he mention anything about that?
No, I should have asked.
Yeah.
That's a really good question.
I wonder what fills the role or the gap of the other parent then in that case. Because like
Right.
I didn't grow up with a father figure, so I wonder, is it just any male role model in the environment that maybe takes that on? I don't know.
Right, right. Or is there like a lack of, you know, teaching you how to engage in that
Right.
world because you're lacking that in the household?
Maybe.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was just like, oh my gosh, when he was talking, I think I told you I tried recording it on my phone, and he just like was going on and on and on to the point that my phone just died because
Oh
it
my
was,
God.
but I didn't have enough battery to like record him teaching, talking for, you know, 2 hours. But I'm just like looking through and seeing if there's anything else. But he just, when he talks, it's just magnetism. Like it's so, so amazing. And you know, the biggest thing that he also spoke about, and Angie spoke about too, is this we all. So when you really look at people's dreams, when you ask your patients, like, what are your dreams? What is your one love? What are you here to do? Figure out, is it about them, the I? Is it about we, like, you know, the people around me? Or is it about all? Is that everybody? Because, and my dreams were actually in the reverse. It was the we, all, I. Because if you're not taking care of I first, if you're not taking care of me first, then you really can't healthfully impact the all. So you have to point that out to the client, that when you look at their dream and you look at their goals, it has to start with the I. And then when the I is healthy, you can move to the we. And then when the we is healthy, you can move to the all.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a wake up call for me of like, oh, I gotta readjust my dreams and make sure that I focus on me so I can be healthy in order to
Wow.
impact all even more.
I'm just realizing how much that goes against the programming, especially for girls and women, to like put other people before yourself and kind of be selfless and just take care of others, and whatever happens to you happens to you. It's like totally antithetical to that.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Yeah, yeah. And it's like, you know, you're told you're selfish if you try
Yep.
to take care of yourself. And you know, your dreams can also be about what you want. It doesn't have to, they don't all have to be about how am I going to impact the world in this great a big way. Like it also has to be about your needs and your desires and your wants as well.
Exactly.
So
I mean, you can see people who are living their dream and they're like making pottery or like doing some form of art, and it's like that's their truest rawest expression, and they're impacting the world. Like you will still impact the world through that art, through that expression. It just may not be like, dealing with people's health at a grand scale, for example, like Paul is doing. It could be you're creating this art that inspires other people to like tap into their creative side. Like it could manifest in so many ways.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. When you really stick with a thing that you are meant to do in life, you have no idea how it will impact others. And that thing might be starting with, like you said, making a craft or healing yourself. I mean, look, a lot of the work we do is because of the work we've done on ourselves. And Paul and the program really values that, is that you're here as a coach and learning about this because of the work you've done on yourself, and you need to be your first patient. Like you cannot go to these classes for other people, you need to go for yourself. And I remember talking to Kuba, my holistic practitioner who studied with Chek years ago. And I said, I said to him, I'm ready to go enroll in the Chek Institute. And he said, you better be ready to do some hard work on yourself, because if not, Paul's going to rip you apart. Like you got to go and know that this is the work you're doing on you first. And then you can start to implement it with your clients. And what's so beautiful is that from the work that you and I do is we are growing when we work with our clients. Our
Yes.
clients come into our lives to teach us something too. I had a Wu Tai instructor. I studied this French, it was like a weird massage. I should call it weird, but it's this French unique dancing massage modality that Mariana introduced me to. My friend Mariana, who I'm excited to introduce you to. And the instructor, Davide, he said to me, he said, isn't it so beautiful that we get to work on ourselves through working with our clients, and that we get paid by our clients to work on ourselves?
Yes, totally. Totally. And that's like a perspective shift too. And
Oh, major.
we were actually just talking about this also on the podcast we recorded yesterday, how so much like the vast majority of the learning doesn't happen in the classroom and in the textbook. It happens like interfacing with the people that you're working with. Like that's going to be your biggest teacher by far.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was a personal trainer and I started training, no one wants to take the hard cases, right? The people with the medical issues or the injuries or the hard personalities. And I was like, I'll take whatever. And I wouldn't know about this medical issue, and I would Google it, and then I would learn about it from the client. And then you become an expert, and maybe not an expert, but like you understand it. You become, you get to, and then what happens? You can take on more referrals of people with similar issues or maybe more complex issues, because at least you can navigate it. But I really felt like I was never going to learn it until I actually experienced it with the client. I mean, that's really how you figure it out. So it is a beautiful thing. It's a really nice paradigm shift when we work with people to think about our growth and, our clients and patients in a way being part of that soul connection of they're coming in to teach us something too.
Yes,
As much as they're coming to us for guidance.
yes, exactly. And you're a match for each other. And you can always feel when your clients are a match for you or not. Like it just kind of feels effortless, you know?
Yes, yes, that's the best when
It's
you're
the
working
best.
with people, and that's when it doesn't feel like the work. That's when
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I'm doing what I'm meant to do here, and it's a good fit, and it's not always easy to come across, but when it does, it's really magical.
Yes. And I mean, I think that's the beauty of having the financial freedom to be able to say to a client, I don't think you're the right fit for me, but
Yeah.
I don't need your money. Like I think actually for your well-being, I need to send you to somebody else. Versus if you're relying on that paradigm financially, it's like I'm gonna maybe hold on to you longer than I should because I need the money.
Yes, yes, and I've totally been guilty of that in the beginning.
Totally. Oh yeah,
Hard. It's
especially
so
in the beginning.
scary. Sometimes I'm like, why are they still coming back? And my favorite is when I first started, I would have people who I just dreaded working with who are not good fits. Now, as soon as I have a consult call, I can tell whether it's a good fit or not. And if it's not, I'll send them. I'll be like, hey, I actually know someone who might be able to help you better, or like I can get some names of someone who might be able to help you better. But these people, and I would like dread the sessions, and I'd be like, oh my God, is this going to be the day that they tell me they don't want to work with me anymore? But I was worried about it from a financial perspective of, well, if this is the day they tell me they don't want to work with me, then what am I going to do? Because I won't be making the money. But then the day they finally decided to tell me they didn't want to work with me anymore, it was a relief. It was like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh, I don't have to keep doing this and showing up stressed out to every session, you know? But and the prostitute archetype of, working with people who are not necessarily the right fit for you, but for the money. And then it does get complicated. And then I ask myself sometimes of those people I've asked, like, why do they keep coming back? Right. Like I said earlier. And I'm like, am I giving them something? I don't know. Do they just like having someone there? Is there some sort of benefit to the therapeutic relationship for them? Um, and then other people, it's just like so obvious that they're coming because they're learning and they're growing and they're excited about the work and they're making the changes and they're seeing the improvements in their life and they're feeling better and moving better and eating better and breathing better and all those things. So it's interesting when people come to practitioners because you do have those 4 different clients that you'll treat. And they probably come for they come for different reasons.
absolutely. And I think that's where understanding how like energy is kind of a two-way street, where if you're feeling that very inspired, lit up, excited energy while working with somebody, they're going to be feeling it too. They kind of have to be in order to engage in that relationship, versus if it feels like pulling teeth, like vast majority of cases, it's the other person's going to be feeling that same exact way.
Yes. Oh, totally, totally. And they call it, right, in therapy and psychology, they call it the transference and the countertransference. Those terms, yeah. But it's really, it's the feeling, the energy. And this is one point I want to make sure I made too, is being sensitive. And we mentioned that earlier, but we mentioned it in one context, and I want to talk about it also in another context of detoxing, is that when you start to detox and you start to have a healthier lifestyle, it doesn't feel good at first, but a healthy body is a sensitive body. And a healthy body can tell when it's eaten something that is not right for it, right? Like we talk about this a lot of like our food intolerances, and we're sensitive to maybe bright lights at night, or we're sensitive to noises or different things. And it's like, as you get healthier in a way, like, obviously people who are unhealthy also can tell if they don't feel good, but right. If you're very sensitive to coffee, like Angie talked about this, she is highly, highly sensitive to caffeine and she cannot drink it. It like really wires her up and makes her feel not great. But that same sensitivity that makes her not feel good to coffee and recognize it's not right for her is the same sensitivity that allows her to do her shaman practices and connect to other people's souls and do that energy healing work, because it allows her to really open herself up and feel things and take things in. So it's kind of like, in a way, like it can be considered maybe a double-edged sword, because maybe it's not so pleasant that she said, she'll eat a potato chip, a siete potato chip, and even though it's cooked in coconut oil, she'll still get a breakout the next day. So her body's very sensitive, but it also allows her to do this really beautiful work to help people. And
Yes.
I think people are like, well, if you're so healthy, why can't you tolerate XYZ, right? Like, why do you have, well, maybe my body knows that it shouldn't be eating. I love, there's something Paul said once in a podcast he did that was like you kill animals with this crap that we're eating, right? Like, it's like, why? Like, maybe your body knows that it shouldn't be eating this like overly processed food. I mean, I know there's different takes on that, right? Of like, how much should you be able to tolerate and not tolerate things, but like, yeah, it doesn't always feel good to be sensitive, but that sensitivity is what helps you connect with your soul. It's what helps you do the work that you're meant to do. And it helps you bring your light out and impact the world in a beautiful way. So, and leads you into the right direction.
Yes, absolutely. Is there anything else you wanted to share on that? It sounds like you're good.
Um, no, I think I have to like go through. I'm going to send you more stuff in the notes just for your
Oh,
own
yeah.
personal, because you're going to love it. You're going to love it. But no, I have to read through more of my notes. So I was like, there's like so much. It's 5 days of like really long days of information. So it really like, it hits you hard. And it's like, how do I, yeah, you could
You're
like
still
retake,
integrating it, and you can't really integrate it fully until you start incorporating it in your own life, and then also working
right?
with clients, and then you can really see how it plays out and really understand like how to use it and like what the utility is for all the different tools. So totally makes sense that it would take some time to like fully integrate that, and being able to
Yeah,
articulate it is like the final step of understanding something, like the articulation part. So many
100%.
people are like talking about things they don't understand at all,
Oh
so
my
it's
gosh,
really important in
seriously.
conversation.
Yeah, I could like retake the course again, even though I can't lie, I really want to take HLC 3 in April.
You're gonna do it in April? Are you gonna do it?
feel like almost bought it yesterday. I was like, they say to spend more time with the material, but I'm also like, I dove right in. I got back Monday. Tuesday, I was singing the four doctors and to all my patients and having them fill out the forms and doing the exercises. And so I feel like if I have a few more months under my belt to really integrate and make sure I practice myself, I do want to take it in 2024 and it's only being offered once. So
Yes, it seems like
yeah,
it could be the right fit then. That's so
I'll keep you
exciting.
updated. Yeah, and I'm going to work with Angie a little bit more. Like I said, I'm going to meet with her this week and do a soul retrieval. I think I'm going to do a few other sessions with her because it's a great way to also just like be able to personalize the work, right? Like I sat in class and learned it. So now if I have a coach to really help me implement it on my own, who is a master of the material, then it's going to be even more impactful. So
Oh my goodness, I can't wait to hear about how that goes on Friday.
yeah, same to
Wow.
tell you.
Elyse, I love you so much.
Oh, I love you so much too,
Much
Alexis.
fun. This has been so fun. Literally like my favorite podcast ever.
Oh my
No
gosh. Thank
lie.
you for wanting to talk about Paul and geek out on Paul, our favorite man.
Oh, Keith isn't gonna be happy. Second favorite.
Sorry, Keith. I know. Oh, we gotta get you to meet Paul one day.
No, I'm really
Podcast
excited
goals
to
for
see.
both of us. Be on his podcast.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we both have plenty of great information and wisdom to share on there, so it's only a matter of time.
I know, right? I said to Angie after Paul left during our session, when I did my private session with her, I was like, I don't know how to say this other than I'm just obsessed with you guys. Like, I don't know what else.
I don't know how else to say this, but I want to be your third wife.
Right. Do you have to explain that to the audience? The
Paul has two wives.
last thing I tell people, because as soon as I tell them, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
and you listen to this guy. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't invalidate his material. And I would totally be his third wife if he asked me to. So-
It's not like he has 50 wives, it's only two.
and I met them both and they're so lovely. Like it was so fun to meet Penny and Angie in person and the kids. Like, yeah, like she is a tough cookie. Let me tell you.
Seems like it. Well,
It
but
was
I feel like her and Angie are very like different, very different, which makes sense.
Yeah, they are different. But actually, Angie told us this beautiful story how she's always wanted to go skydiving. So for her birthday, I think it was her 40th. I'm not sure. I can't remember which one. It might have been 45th. Penny took her skydiving for her birthday.
Oh, that's sweet.
I know. How fun is that? Like, and then she showed us the video.
Gosh, that is so fun.
Skydiving. Yeah, like she surprised her.
Ah,
So
adorable.
yeah, no, it just seems like they all have just a very authentic, um, meaningful relationship and raise their kids with such great values and lifestyle and they have the pigs and the chickens on the farm that I played with and yeah.
Can you imagine being raised as one of Paul Chek's kids? It would be like
Oh my, I literally like looked at these kids and I'm like thinking, do you know how lucky you are? Like, oh
right.
my gosh.
Thoroughly.
And you just see them running around and having a blast and just being regular kids. And you're like, oh my gosh, like it's so fun. Yeah, it was so cool. Oh, and also just as an wait, the gym. I just want to talk about the gym for a second. His gym is just it's just primal movement. It's so cool. And then he has this image. Did I send you the image of that he has painted on the gym? It's the top of the gym, and it's basically it's people engaging in real world activities that emulate the 7 primal movement patterns.
Amazing.
There's
Maybe you did, but I can't
I
quite
can't remember. If not, I'll send it to you. But it's like, what is it? Because it's squat, lunge, hinge, push, press, pull, and twist are the 7 primal movement patterns. So it's cool because you actually see people doing these things in real life in nature.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
That's why they're so important. I mean, those are like the very basics for being a human.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly. So
movements just due to
yeah.
the rigidity of our modern lives. Like we're really just sitting, standing, maybe walking, and like not doing much else.
Right, right. So it's nice. I've been really thinking more about my workouts and I mean, I do because I've studied these primal pattern movements for so long because of his work, but just making sure that I'm integrating them more in a functional way in the gym and having fun with it. And Angie actually said something. She said, because Angie used to be a bodybuilder.
Oh, I didn't
So
know that.
yeah, yeah. She used to be, well, so she had her own gym for a really long time. Was it a gym or she worked in a gym and then she had her own business called Angie's World. And
Oh,
she did like nutrition and holistic stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I think it was like before or in the beginning when she really got into the Chek stuff. But she said that she really looked her best actually when Paul only had her do 4 or 5 exercises at a time and not overdoing it. So just saying that as a reminder of, if you are someone who either maybe doesn't move enough or moves too much, maybe you're over exercising, which I've been guilty of, that you really just need to find a balance. Like you don't need to go to the gym and hit, you know, 45 sets of hamstrings. Like that's not necessary, like you can just pick 4 or 5 exercises and just stick with those 4 or 5 exercises, do 2 to 4 sets, and that might actually be the best thing for you because you're not driving a ton of, you know, stress on the body.
totally. I think this is especially the case for women too, because a lot of the research on exercise physiology is like done with men, and then we kind of just think that we're supposed to do the same things as them. But then there's also this weird relationship that women have in the modern world with like cardio exercise, and so we tend to like turn our weightlifting into cardio by just like doing back-to-back sets, like
Oh,
circuit training. It's like we're never taking breaks. We're not like lifting close to failure. We're kind of just like doing things at like a very high volume with heart rate staying high, and then we think we're
yeah.
burning more calories, so it must be good.
It's so true. It's so true. And I'm really reframing after hearing Angie say that. I'm reframing my workout practices and I took 10 days off of weightlifting. I went to Florida for 10 days. I didn't work out for 10 days. It was really hard for me, both from a mental, emotional standpoint, because there's a little bit of like an exercise addiction in the sense of like movement makes me feel better. But also I was like, oh my gosh, what if I lose my muscle mass? Like, what if I lose like the shape, right? And I have to tell you, like I got back to the gym and I didn't really lose anything after 10 days. Like I didn't really lose any strength. So it was really validated. It was like, you know what? My body's going to take a break and it's going to benefit from it. And it'll be so good. And when I come back, I'm not going to overdo it because in past tendencies, it would be to overdo it to make up
Mhm.
for those 10 days off. I said, no, I'm just going to do, like Angie said, pick 4 or 5 exercises and just do that. And I don't need to be at the gym for more than 40 minutes, you know?
Totally. Totally. I
So
mean, that's definitely been my experience too. I'll usually take like 6 weeks off twice a year of lifting, and when I go back, usually I can lift the same, if not even slightly more than when I stopped.
and 6 weeks is a long time.
Yes, it's a long
Yeah,
time. I'm still staying active. Like I'm just mostly walking or maybe doing
right.
sprint work or things like that. But like lifting weights, like I go through seasons where like I feel like I'm really into it, and then other times my body's just like not about it. And I listen to that, and I maintain my strength, and I maintain like the physique that I like. So we can often do much less work than we think we have to get the results we want, I think.
It's so true. And that fear holds us back. Like for me, it was always fear.
Yeah,
Fear of losing the muscle mass, fear of not looking as good. And you're right, like our bodies maintain it and they're very resilient and the break is good. So this is part of the transformation, the shift I'm going through right now.
totally. It's a big mental thing too,
It is.
especially because of like just weird diet culture and just like
I
the
know.
weirdness on that. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm glad we even mentioned it, even though it wasn't, the focus, just to mention it so people know, like if they're experiencing that, they're not alone.
Absolutely, so important. Oh my goodness, Elise, thank you so much for coming on. I loved this
Thanks, too.
conversation.
Me too, me too. And it was great for me to go back through my material. So
Yes, I'm so glad we did this and didn't wait until we could do it in person. I was gonna come in person today, but the weather was kind of bad, so we ended up rescheduling our New York plans. But I'm so glad we ended up doing this. It was so
yes, same.
fun.
Same, same, same. Oh my gosh, to be continued and
Yes,
sharing Paul trivia. We'll let everyone know who released Paul trivia.
release a game.
We're the only 3 people who will care. You, me, and Keith, and Paul.
Literally, it's only 3 players here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, Elise, can you remind people where they can find you online? I'm also going to link to everything in the show notes.
Yes, yes. So you can find me on Instagram at nerdy_therapist. Nerdy spelled like neurology, NEURDY therapist. Same handle on TikTok. We'll share our website and my website, and please feel free to reach out if anyone has any questions or follow up or any thoughts and feedback. I'd love to hear.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I will see you soon. Hopefully next Tuesday we're going to
Yes,
be together and I
and
look
your pendulums.
yes, and I get the pendulums. I'm excited to try them. It'll
We'll
be
we'll test all your chakra systems, and I'll show you how Angie taught us to heal the chakras that might not be turned on as much.
oh my God, amazing. Maybe we should film that and like put it on Instagram or something.
Yes, I love it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, amazing. All right. Thank you so much for listening. This was a long episode, but if you've had this similar experience as me, it's been like a riveting and very compelling episode. So I hope you enjoyed it. You can find this on Spotify and YouTube. And if you want to become a patron, you can follow on Patreon, /Undoctrinate Yourself podcast. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you and we'll see you again next week.
Yes, so much love. Mwah. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.